Welcome to Teaching to the Top, Designing Lessons with the Gifted Learner in Mind. My name is Clint Rodriguez, and I am going to be taking you through this slide deck and this recording. As you are working through the assignments, the first thing that you're going to want to do is make sure that you have access to all of the relevant links. That first bit.ly is the access to this slide deck with all of the different links and things in it. The second bit.ly is going to take you to a workspace where you're going to be recording all of your thinking and all of your reflection. If you're a Twitter person, you can follow my personal account at CTRodGifted. You can also follow Region 11's official Advanced Academics and GT account at R11Gifted. And if you have any questions relating to gifted education or just the specifics of this particular training, you can email me at crodriguez@esc11.net. So why are we here? Well, one of the things that this training is designed to do is to get you thinking about your standard curriculum and how it can meet the needs of GT students. One of the best things to do for advanced students is just to accelerate content, let them move faster, but we also want to be able to spend time thinking more deeply and more rigorously about content. So this particular training is really about adding depth and breadth and complexity to whatever standards or texts you are responsible for teaching. In terms of how you're going to get there, these are our learning objectives for the day. We're going to learn to use the depth and complexity icons in a gamified pre-assessment or potentially a test review, something of that nature. We're then going to learn to combine depth and complexity icons in order to deepen thinking. The icons themselves are great on their own, but when you put them together in different combinations, they really lead to a lot of higher level questioning and more rigorous thinking. We're going to learn to use depth and complexity to frame problem-based learning as a way of figuring out what kinds of problems and projects kids want to do. And then we're also going to use depth and complexity to conceptualize content in terms of a big picture and not just as discrete units of knowledge. And then finally, we're going to learn how to cap activities in order to differentiate for gifted students. So that takes us to part one, introducing depth and complexity. If you're familiar with it, you can probably just skip over this portion of the video, but if you're not, I'm going to briefly explain each of the icons and then I'm going to point you to some resources. So up here we have the icons that were originally created by Sandra Kaplan, and then over here we have the newer content imperatives. So starting over here at the left, the lips are language of the discipline, flowers detail, the little zigzag pattern is patterns, the org chart looking thing is rules, this is trends, unanswered questions, the black and white diamond is ethics, the Parthenon looking structure here is big idea, change over time, multiple perspectives. This is across the disciplines. Then over here we have origins, contribution, convergence, parallel, and then finally paradox, one of my favorites. So to better understand what each of these icons means, you can click on this bit.ly link here and it will take you to this one pager over here. Okay, and that gives you the icons themselves, the definition of the icon, some keywords and synonyms for the name of the icon, and then also I've written a higher level question just to give you an idea of how you connect the icon and the lens, the thinking skill that the icon indicates to a question. In terms of other resources that you might want to take a look at down here, J. Taylor Education provides a lot of really glossy, great materials for your classroom. Gifted Guru, Lisa Van Gemmert's website, has a whole bunch of free downloads with frames and things like that. Same thing with Envision Gifted and also birdseat.com. So if you're really interested in depth and complexity, those are some places that I would recommend looking. So take a moment to look over that one pager and try to familiarize yourself with the icons. And what you're going to want to do as you're looking over that one pager is make a note of maybe the 3 or 4 or even 5 of those icons and imperatives that really stick out to you, that maybe you just kind of find yourself attracted to, maybe the ones that you think will fit really well with your particular content. So for example, trends and patterns and rules, that tends to fit really well with mathematics. Ethics is a great one for social studies and also for literature, although I think you can do a lot with ethics in terms of science as well. So take a moment, pick your favorite icons, and we'll go ahead and move on to the depth and complexity quick draw game. Okay, so the way that I envisioned this when I put it together was that you would have, your rules here, which you can read over. They may be a little bit too complicated. Feel free to edit those and change them around because I'm not a game designer by trade. So you've got your rules, you've got your board, and then you have these cards here with topics on them. So these cards you would switch out for your own content. I just chose topics that I thought it would be interesting for adults to be able to talk about in a training. But you would, of course, pick content topics that are related to what you're actually teaching and also to what is appropriate for your kids and what they can actually handle. So these are your topic cards. All of this, by the way, is available down here in this bit.ly DNC quick draw. So that's kind of some of the game pieces. More game pieces. You've got a score sheet over here. How to use the score sheet is explained in the rules. And then you've got some of these action cards that I tried to sort of put together like an Uno game. Not really sure how well they work. You can give it a try with your kids, or maybe you can play it with your family while you're stuck here in quarantine. Then over here, the ones that we're going to be looking at, in addition to the topic cards, are the actual icon cards. So the way that the game would start is that you'd have a group of, maybe 4 or 5 kids. They've got their topics. Either you're pre-assessing them, say, here's all the topics we're going to be learning about. This is a chance for you to kind of process what you already know. Or maybe it's a review. When it's come to exam time, you put all the stuff that you've learned in your scope and sequence onto those topic cards, and then kids, rather than filling out a packet, are playing a game. So the first thing you do is you draw a topic card. The topic card that we have drawn is book bans. And so I'm going to take a moment to kind of consider what I know about this topic. Maybe I'm going to do a little quick write on it if you want to include that sort of portion with it. And I'm also going to think about what my initial feelings about book bans are. What is my gut telling me? All right, so then I, as the player who have drawn that topic card, would then draw an icon card. And the rules indicate sort of, there's a legend there what these little symbols mean, but the ellipses basically says that I've drawn the topic card of book bans, and now I have to make an ethical statement about the topic of book bans. So I'll think about it as the person who's drawn the cards, and there's all these different reversals and switches and passes and things that kids can build into the game based on the rules, but we're just going to do the simple version. I, as the player, have drawn the topic card. I've drawn my icon card. I have to make an ethical statement about book bans. So I come up with, sometimes it is necessary to ban books and other art because they might introduce dangerous ideas into the public sphere. For example, is freedom of speech so important that we should continue to allow the publication of Mein Kampf? And this is the point where other players would then be allowed to respond. So take a moment and try to reflect on what some of the advantages and disadvantages of gamifying pre-assessment and post-assessment might be. Okay, this brings us to part 2, which is combining icons. So what we're going to look at is a philosophical problem known as the trolley problem, and we're going to look at it through the lens of ethics as our first icon. So the trolley problem, if you've seen The Good Place or you've taken kind of an intro-level moral philosophy class in college, is essentially this. There is a trolley. It is out of control. The brakes don't work. The driver has bailed, and you are the switchman. Okay, so you have a couple of different options. You can either do nothing, in which case the trolley barrels on and takes out these 5 people here, or you can pull the switch and the trolley barrels down here and takes out this person here. Either way, somebody's day is going to get ruined. So the real question, the first question that comes up if we're using the ethics icon is pretty simple. Okay, what is the ethical question created by the situation? Now, that's not a bad question. It allows kids or whoever's looking at the problem to recognize, that there is a moral conundrum at work here. And oftentimes, if you present this to audiences, they'll want to know, okay, well, is this a good person? Did these people just pull off a bank heist? They really try to game the problem. They try to bargain with the problem. This first question, like I said, is an okay question, but we can come up with a better question. So by combining icons, we can then ask, okay, there's an ethical problem at work here, but there are also multiple perspectives to how that problem should be solved. So the question that you come up with when you combine the icons is, what are the multiple ethical perspectives about what the switch operator should do? And then asking, what is the best one? Now, that section down here is underlined for a very important reason, because again, The first part of this two-part question, what are the multiple ethical perspectives, is not a bad question because it's getting people to recognize that there's more than one way to look at a problem, right? But it's still just asking kids to identify things. When you combine icons and then combine them with another layer of Bloom's taxonomy or depth of knowledge or Costa's different levels, that's when you really supercharge your questioning. So by asking kids to evaluate these perspectives after we've combined those icons, we've really come up with a great question. So the process that you would go through in order to do this is you got your topic. I've chosen COVID-19 because it's what's on everybody's minds. And then you combine your topic with two different icons and you come up with a good question, okay? What are the multiple ethical perspectives on how the COVID-19 pandemic should be handled? But if you take your topic, COVID-19, and then you add in a couple of icons, and then you add in that higher level thinking skill, whether it's your Blooms, whether it's your Costas, whether it's your depth of knowledge, does not matter. That's when you get to a really great question. So taking my topic, COVID-19, adding ethics, multiple perspectives, and the evaluate thinking skill, well, the question I have now is really supercharged. Which of the multiple ethical perspectives on how the COVID-19 pandemic should be handled has the most compelling evidence to back it up, okay? So now kids are doing all different kinds of things, doing all different levels of thinking just by combining icons with that thinking skill. So take a moment to practice this topic, review that icon one-pager, pick a topic that you're going to be teaching in the next couple of weeks here, maybe when the new semester starts after summer, and then those icons that you marked earlier, take a look at those, see which of those spoke to you, and then try to combine them. For a bonus, you can try to combine as many icons as you can into useful combinations for asking questions. To give you an idea of how to get started, that bit.ly there will take you back to Envision Gifted. They've done a whole lot of work there with combining icons. You can also combine 3 icons if you really, really want to show off. So here I've taken my 3 favorite icons, ethics, multiple perspectives, and paradox. And now I'm asking, again, a really good question. What is the best solution? Okay, so evaluate, note that that evaluate skill is in there, to the conundrum posed by the multiple ethical perspectives about what the switch operator should do. Okay, so again, we're combining all these different lenses, the icons themselves, and then we're adding in that thinking skill, and now we've got a really intriguing question about content. You can also, a lot of the time, combine icons in order to create a big idea or a universal theme about whatever topic it is that you are teaching. So rather than asking a question at this point, I'm combining my icons and thinking about these different lenses approaching the problem. And I'm using that thinking in order to come up with a big generalization about the topic. Okay, so what I've done here, combine my 3 favorite icons, and I've thought about it, and now I've come up with a big idea. Relating the relating the smaller problem of the trolley problem to larger philosophical problems, which is competing ethical perspectives often lead to morally untenable situations where there is no good solution. So I've made a big generalization. I've come up with a universal theme. So take a moment to try that on your own. Look at those favorite icons that you had and come up with a universal theme. All right, now we're going to focus on just one icon, which is the big idea icon, and I'm going to refer to big idea kind of interchangeably with universal theme. So how do you use the big idea icon? Well, what I would do is I would think about whatever topics I am trying to teach, not the big ideas I'm trying to teach, but the big topics, okay? So you've got your big idea icon here, and then I've chosen a whole bunch of big topics, okay? I have a personal pet peeve where people say, the theme of this unit is community, or the theme of this book is diversity. Those are not themes, those are topics, okay? Themes, universal themes, big ideas are sentences, all right? They are not words, all right? So how am I going to get from these big topics over here to this big idea over here? Okay, so I'm using the example of To Kill a Mockingbird, all right? So To Kill a Mockingbird covers a lot of big topics. It covers topics like justice, it covers topics like guilt, it covers topics like leadership. And what I've done is I've placed them into a depth and complexity frame, and as my kids are reading To Kill a Mockingbird, they're going to be thinking about, okay, what does To Kill a Mockingbird have to say about the big topic of justice? What is To Kill a Mockingbird's big idea about the big topic of justice? And they would sort of write here in this portion of the frame as they were reading through. You could even use this as a writing assessment or a way to frame writing. And they're over here, okay, so what is the big idea about the big topic of guilt in To Kill a Mockingbird? And then you could also give them some sentence stems as well, just to kind of help them along. So the big idea about family in To Kill a Mockingbird is ... That would be, a sentence as shown by, and they would have their textual evidence. So that's one way of getting them to think about big topics, is in this frame that they would write in. So we've got these big topics. We were trying to figure out what the big idea is, but then we can maybe combine big ideas and come up with the universal theme, or a universal theme or big idea of To Kill a Mockingbird is leadership often means fighting for justice even when you know you won't win. So notice I've combined what To Kill a Mockingbird is saying about these two big topics, all right? So that's how you would use big topics, these big kind of overarching things about which your discipline or your text is concerned, and then generate some big ideas. So it's your turn to practice. Take some time to generate some big topics that you teach about, and then think about how would you come up with a big idea to describe them, or how would you ask students to do that? And that bit.ly down there will again take you to a resource where some folks have kind of shown you how to do it. Okay, I'd like you to take a moment to reflect now. How might you have students combine icons to deepen their understanding of topics? And then think about how you could gamify it. One of the things that I might do is I might, again, have some topic cards like leadership, justice, guilt, after I've had my kids read To Kill a Mockingbird, and then sort of have them do a snowball fight or just kind of a walk around the room, and when they run into three people, they all read their topic cards, and together they have to come up with a big idea about whatever text they were reading. So that's one way that you could try to gamify it. Okay, now we're going to get into using depth and complexity for problem-based learning. Okay, so what I would like you to do, go ahead and pause the video, make yourself a list of some unsolved problems or unanswered questions in the discipline that you teach, and really try to think about some of the problems and unsolved problems and unanswered questions that maybe your kids would be intrigued with. Okay. And I want you to get that list together, because now what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at using the depth and complexity icons to help kids frame a problem-based or a project-based learning independent study. Okay, so what you're going to do, and I'm just going to click through these. I'm not going to describe everything that you're going to see on the slide because there is a whole bunch of slides. Just pause them as you see fit. Really focus on the icons that you selected earlier on in the video, and look at the questions that are posed related to that icon. Okay, so here's the beginning of this sort of just silent click through. I will say one thing. A lot of this stuff is based on the 4 parallels. Okay, so if you're thinking about the topic that you're teaching, that's your core curriculum, and the question that kids are going to be asking about that core curriculum in terms of the problem they're trying to solve is, what must I know and be able to do to solve the problem? Connections, okay, so how does this problem relate to other problems? How does my curriculum relate to other curriculum, and what those problems are embedded in the context of other problems and issues? Practice, okay, so I have identified a problem. Well, what would an expert do in order to solve this problem? And then finally, there's no reason to solve a problem unless it's going to have some kind of impact on the world. So that identity question is, okay, how will solving this problem impact me and the world? And the whole idea of all of this is that you get kids moving up this spectrum from beginner, where they don't know very much and they need a lot of teaching and they need a lot of help, to novice, where they need less help. You're kind of releasing some of the responsibility to them, to practitioner, where they're able to do it on their own, to expert, where they know so much about the topic and so much about the problem that they could teach others about it. Not that we're going to make our advanced kids be our assistant teachers. That's not our job. But, could they explain it in a way that, a novice could understand it? And then finally, once we're talking about college and career, we really want them not just to be experts, but also eminent, which I like to think of as the experts that other experts ask. So what I'm going to do now is just click through these slides. What you will see is the icon and then some questions related to problem-based learning. So just sort of look for the icons that you really identified with earlier on, and I'm just going to click through this silently. Feel free to pause the video as you need. So here's language of the discipline, details, patterns. By the way, these are all poster quality, so you could print them out and put them around the room if you wanted. You could also copy and paste this stuff and put it into kind of a workbook form for kids as they're kind of organizing their thoughts about their problem. Here's trends. Rules. Unanswered questions. Ethics. Big idea. Over time. Multiple perspectives. Across disciplines. Contribution. Convergence. Origin. Paradox. Parallel. And finally, we've clicked through all of those. What I'd like you to do is think about how you might use these icons to help students generate ideas for independent study and project. Okay, what we're going to do next is we're going to use the depth and complexity icons for conceptualizing content in terms of big picture and not so much in discrete units of knowledge. Okay, so it's not where you're thinking about science, we're teaching biology, chemistry, physics, etc. It's thinking about science itself as a discipline so that kids can conceptualize things as a big picture and then tie that discrete learning back to the larger overarching questions of the discipline. So what I'm going to do is, again, just a very quick click through. There's about 50 slides here. You pause the video where you need to for your discipline that you teach. In order to see how I've asked some of these big picture questions about that content. I'm going to go ahead and say right now, math people, you can go ahead and tune out because as of this recording, I have not completed the math portion, but I am working on that. So be looking for a future video that really does do this with math. Okay, so what we're doing now is just looking at asking big picture questions about different disciplines. So we're just going to start. I'll occasionally pause to point some things out, but really this is just fast forward, slow down, pause as you need to with these big picture questions. And we're going to start with language arts. Notice what I'm doing here is I'm not asking about a specific book. I'm asking about bigger picture things like what authors do. So you can apply these questions to any story, nonfiction, fiction, any kind of text. Now we're into social studies, starting again with language of the discipline. I guess I should have put music to this part. There's a typo up there. Now we'll jump over to science. We're in the home stretch now. Again, we're asking very general questions about science as a discipline. We're not asking about specific things like biology, chemistry, even some of those subdisciplines. The idea is that we're going to take these big ideas, these bigger picture questions, and we're going to apply them to the more discrete units of knowledge. And if students can see the bigger picture about things, it's much easier for them to connect different kinds of knowledge and different topics. Remember I said earlier you could do a whole lot by combining the ethics icon with science. I definitely took my own advice on that here. Okay, so now it's time for reflection. What kinds of big picture questions might you ask students that are specific to what you teach? And then also reflect on what's the advantage of big picture thinking? Why is it important for kids to be able to see things from kind of that, 50,000 foot view, as opposed to just today we're learning this, tomorrow we're learning that, and never seeing how any of it connects? All right, finally, we're going to talk about a differentiation strategy called capping. So there are a whole bunch of different ways to differentiate things. You've got a description of some of them over here. We really tend to think about it in terms of content. So these kids are getting this content because they're ready for more, they're moving faster. These kids are going to spend more time on this content because they aren't getting it as quickly. So really thinking about acceleration, adding more content, changing the reading level of something, switching out the book, that kind of thing. Only do the odd numbered problems, only do the even numbered problems. So that's not necessarily what we want to look at today. There's also process differentiation, product differentiation, and finally environment differentiation, which we're not doing a whole lot of now just because everybody is stuck at home. So content, like I said, that's acceleration, remediation, thinking about student readiness, and then this other piece here, which I think is really important. How do students feel about the content? Do they generally like the content? Have they liked the content in the past? Or maybe their teacher last year was not very much fun, so they kind of have a bad taste in their mouth related to that content. How are you going to get them back to being interested into liking that content? Okay, the next one we're going to skip over process is product. So what kinds of assignments are kids doing in terms of formative assessment and post-assessments and assessments in general, and also what kinds of projects are they doing? And then finally, environment. So are you thinking about grouping? Are you thinking about classroom flexibility, indoor, outdoor? Are kids allowed to move between stations, things of that nature? What we're really going to focus on, though, is process. So as you are approaching content, as you are thinking about content, what are the lenses you are looking at that content with? Okay, so the lenses of depth and complexity, breadth, and then also what kinds of thinking skills. Are you having them think about this at a higher level in terms of their Blooms or their DOK or their Costas, or are you staying really at kind of like the level of analysis and below? Okay. So that brings us to, okay, well, what is capping activities? It's a way of differentiating process so that you can also differentiate product. Okay, so there's three different ways of approaching content according to this process. There's the creative, there's the analytical, and there's the practical. And kind of the generalization is that every kid fits into one of these more or less most of the time. Kids can, of course, move between them, but you know who your creative kids are, you know who your analytical kids are, and you know who your practical kids are. A way of conceptualizing this as well is a creative kid is going to be one of those kids who's always generating ideas. It's kind of the and then mindset. So some of your action verbs, some of your command words would be role playing, demonstration, design, build, construct, imagine. Then you get to your analytical kids over here. These are the kids who are always asking why. You know these kids. You've probably had plenty of them over the years. So your command words would be things like justify, rank, categorize, explain, outline, defend, debate, and argue. And then practical, those are your yeah, but kids. Those are the ones who are always telling you why something won't work. So these are the kids who are really good at anticipating problems, at solving those problems, at kind of giving you hypotheticals about what could go wrong and what could go right. Kids who are very interested in, well, when am I going to use this in the real world? What's the actual application of this knowledge? And one of the things that's important to know is that these different ways of thinking do talk to each other, all right? So if you're a creative type, it's very easy for creative thinking then to get into critical thinking. So you have all these great ideas and you say, well, yeah, but let's talk about which of all these great ideas is actually going to work, right? And then of all these great ideas that's actually going to work, well, can we rank them in terms of which one's actually going to be the best one and not just the one that's going to work okay? Okay, so there is some conversation between all of these different skills, and that's important to note. As you were thinking about creating CAP activities and capping different topics and units, note that a lot of times you'll come up with something creative and something analytical and something practical. You do want to let kids choose, but you want to manage that choice. So what does this look like? And I'll explain some of that choice management in just a second here. So here's some examples of what a capped activity would look like. So the topic is the same for every kid. Every kid here is discussing and learning about the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. But I, as a teacher, I want to differentiate based on the ways that my kids tend to think. So for my more creative kids, the lesson outcome that I've come up with is, write a new amendment or amendments to the Constitution which will help fix a problem you see in the United States. Justify why you believe this amendment would be an important addition to the Constitution. Okay, so that's my creative thing. Notice that they have to have a lot of knowledge, right? They have to know what the amendments are. They can't be adding, an amendment that already exists. They have to analyze the problem, all right? And then they also have to justify why they think that amendment is important. So it is a creative task, but it is also pulling in some of these other skills. So for my creative kids, I've got that. For my analytical kids, well, the Bill of Rights, another typo there. Rank the amendments in the Bill of Rights in order of importance to modern day people. Okay, so now they're having to evaluate, rank, and judge. So that's the analytical skill. Out of all of the amendments, which would you change or even eliminate? And then again, justify your answer. Okay, so again, everybody's learning about the Bill of Rights. Everybody has to know the Bill of Rights and what it says. These kids are just doing a slightly different task, but that task has just as much value as this task. You could even combine all three of these tasks and have the creative piece be the endpoint. If you are breaking these up and you're letting kids choose which activity they do, don't always let your creative kids choose the creative task. Okay, make them do analytical and practical sometime. All right, same thing with your practical kids. Maybe they don't feel like they're creative. Sometimes you need to force them to try that creativity piece. Then down here for practical, again, we are just talking about the Constitution. Explore the limitations of each amendment. What boundaries, if any, should be placed on individual rights. So here's the yeah, but it's really great to have freedom of blah 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 and all, but. All right, and then what enumerated rights seem to be in contradiction to each other, so where is there kind of a fight between different rights? And then again, practical, make an argument for or against unalienable rights. So again, the topic is all the same. They're just approaching it with different kinds of thinking skills. Okay, here's one for mathematics. What I will say about creative CAP activities is a lot of times what you'll find out there on Pinterest and Teachers Pay Teachers is that people really like kids to do skits. It's almost like they can't think of anything besides doing skits. Don't make everything on the creative piece a skit. Try some other things. Even let your kids come up with what they want their thing to be creatively. Because a lot of times they'll have better ideas than you do. I once had a kid doing a CAP activity on extinction, and they did an interpretive dance on the extinction of the Steller sea cow. So let the kids come up with this sometimes. Design their own activities. Here's an example from science. Again, here's the skit. Don't always use a skit. But again, they're all looking at the same topic. I think the A and the P on this are actually really, really interesting because, okay, so you need to know what protein synthesis looks like and then think about, okay, well, what is the most important part? And then notice how the analytical piece talks to the practical piece, because you have to figure out what the most important step is and then think about, okay, well, what if that step was removed, or if any step was removed? All right, what would happen in terms of genetics, disease, things of that nature? Finally, an ELAR example. Okay, this one I've designed where the kids are writing an epilogue to a story that they've read, so they have to understand the plot dynamics and the character motivations and all of that. You know, for your analytical, go ahead and practice some critical thinking, some critical theory. Write a review of the story. You know, should I read it? Should I not? Is it any good? And then finally, you know, the practical is, well, does this story actually contribute anything to the world? Does it make the world a better place? Does it make me a better person? Is what it's saying about the world really valid? Okay, so that's CAP activities. Just a really quick, easy way of differentiating content, process, and product. Here's an independent study one that I came across. I guess the kids were studying fads and fashion and things like that, so you can kind of see what they came up with there. Right? Now is your time to practice. Pick a new topic or the topic you've been working on and try to come up with a CAP activity for it. How might you be able to cap activities in your classroom to increase rigor and choice for students is your reflection for this piece. Let's review our learning objectives again. I think we did, we obviously learned about the quick draw game. Hopefully you'll find that useful or amusing. We did learn to combine depth and complexity icons in order to deepen thinking. We learned to use depth and complexity to frame problem-based learning and conceptualize content as a big picture. And then we just now learned how to cap activities. So I think we were probably pretty successful in covering everything that I said we were going to cover. For your final reflection, if you're watching this video and taking this course for credit, this is where you're going to record all of your thinking and all of your work. So you're going to turn in that workspace that you've been working on. If you've been using the one that I provided or the one that you made separately, that's fine. Just make sure you turn it in there because that's how you'll get credit. Thank you so much for listening. Everybody stay safe and sane, and we'll see you in the fall.